Speaking of building relationships, you and I have built a relationship over the past, what is it? I guess it's 7 years, 8 years now. Yeah, I think I
Yeah,
started.
that's
I started at KSQ in 2012,
yeah.
so 8 years now. And even though neither of us work with KSQ anymore, we actually were able to come back together and collaborate on a couple projects. You want to take a look at those? We're
Yep.
how are you doing
This
on
is good.
time? We're about an hour and 15 minutes into this thing. I've been checking on the status of the stream.
Yeah.
The stream is shot. Like it's like 30 minutes behind us because my internet connection's so bad. But I am recording it, so I will be able to
Wow.
put this up and we'll chop it up and we'll put in the great points later on. I think people who join us now will be like caught up, but people who joined us at the beginning are like 30 minutes behind us. So if you're good
Oh,
on time, I'm good on time.
yeah.
I'm low on hot chocolate, but it's cold now, so it's now just chocolate milk. It is room temperature chocolate milk, which is interesting. So let's talk about a couple projects that you and I have collaborated on, and this will be a little bit shorter. We'll just go through a couple things about these projects. But the first one I want to talk about is one that you came in and helped us with at Delineations, and this was the Bixby Chamber of Commerce project. Now, this is the building that we started with right here. When you saw this building, if this is the building you start with, where do you even begin trying to be inspired to make a design for this? You know what I'm asking, right? Because there is nothing inspiring about this at all, except that it needs to change. This needs
Yeah.
to change, and I am inspired by that. You can check off dog barking from the live stream bingo card.
That's it. Uh, this is a great um, real life project that is great for architectural students to look at and hear what we're talking about. But it's also uh, an ongoing opportunity for people that do have a practice or are at a job where, excuse me, that are working with big boxes, and this is a big box store. And what do you do to continue to give it life, and give it a second life, and maybe a second life that's even better than the first life? And so you start looking at what can I do with a box? And that's a whole study in itself. And I have an ongoing study that I do and have done for years on what do you do with boxes? What can you do with boxes? And it's limitless. So
Yeah,
when when you brought it up and we sat down together, I was excited because this is a box
so I'm
and we
not
get
gonna
to play with it.
I'm not gonna go through the interior layout and stuff like that because you and I mostly collaborated on we collaborated a little bit on some of the function and program. In fact, maybe do I have well, let's talk about these elevations first. Because despite the exterior being somewhat blah and very much a form that we didn't want the end product to be, you still pulled some inspiration off of that front elevation in some of these concepts.
Yeah.
Still keeping this look right here like this. So do you, if you can recall, I know this was longer than
Yeah.
yesterday ago. What were some of the things? What did that session look like in terms of getting to the point where we had something where we could present? And well, now I'll come back to the second part of that later on.
If I remember correctly, we were both sketching together, opposite sides of the table. And I started with the centerpiece of the existing building, and it reminded me of mid-century modern, and the simplicity of lines, and what would you do if you brought more light into the space? Well, with the user, that kind of light would be tremendous. And you couldn't flood the place with enough light. And so, well, what if we did open it up and provided clear story glass on that right-hand side there, and then tall glazing in the middle? It just seemed to naturally lend itself to that. You could take the outside surfaces and with minor modification, update them and give them a brand new life. And it would be a totally different building with a completely different spirit to it.
Yep. And I think it's important to note also to anyone who's looking at, what this conceptual design process looks like. These are all sketched on trash paper.
Yep.
This is we processed the photos later for the presentation to the client, but this is all on trash paper. So I don't know. I think a lot of students now are of the mindset, and I'm of the mindset that maybe you can do this in a digital way, but I think for you and I, especially for this project, just having a roll of trash paper that you can just rip, draw.
Yep.
It was just the ability to get something down and have these ideas just kind of flow out was, I think, really instrument in getting to, we had a couple of different, so we had this concept also, which was a little bit, squarish, the idea of the facade with the sloped roof behind it, still getting the glass in. And then, was this an earlier sketch? Was this?
I think that was
early
the first sketch.
Yeah, the first,
this.
and then it developed into this a little bit more refined.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and playing around with the idea of, well, what happens if it's more solid and more transparent, things like that.
Right.
And I think we took that, and I think that's what that came from right there.
Right. I agree.
And then we talked about this elevation here, and it's a little weird for us to talk about the elevation before we talk about why this elevation is this way, but we're going to start with this elevation because that's where we've started this discussion. And we opted to do this from that peaked mid-century concept with that idea of the clerestory glass kind of wrapping the entire structure here. So, and I think this one was one that I did that kind of played on the idea that of that peaked kind of low-slung international style look, with the idea that we knew that there was going to be a co-working space on this street facing over here. So you start to see things like the Chamber of Commerce logo, entries that indicate people are biking to work, a co-working kind of sitting area here. Oh, you can't see my screen, I just realized. Oh, you can see my screen.
Yeah.
Hey, look at that. And then this idea of like this party deck out here. That the client was just jokingly talking about, but I was thinking, why can't that be a reality? And you always start with this question of what if. So I'm going to see if I can get to these site images here, or not. Okay. So this was kind of where we started. We've got our site here, and we had some other nodes downtown that created these pathways here. And essentially what happened is we took this Chamber of Commerce building, and what did it become? Through the process of us kind of sitting and just having a jam session. This is an architectural jam session that we really had, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are always fun. You look forward to those in a project. So what do you remember that what became of this? Like in terms of like
Yeah.
we started out as okay, we need a public physical building for Chamber of Commerce. What else does the Chamber of Commerce mean to the city of Bixby? And that just kind of turned into this. Do you remember kind of some of the things that happened with this?
Yeah, it was taking that, the Dollar Tree or whatever it was, as taking that centerpiece and creating an east-west pedestrian tree-lined event, through the parking lot, and changing the parking lot so that there's more vegetation in it, trees, and really making it a pleasant place to park, and just instead of a sea of asphalt out there. You and I talked about that and what happens when you come into the place. How do you feel orientated? What's in the big blue area there that's hatched in the middle? And the south side, if I remember right, was off of an alleyway. So that would be a more walled section where windows out there would be limited to high clear story.
Yeah, there's a building. You talking about this street side here or the alley back here?
The east-west kind of alleyway.
Yeah, yeah.
The true alley is the north-south one in the back.
Oh,
with
yeah,
all the utilities and crap.
Yeah,
But,
so this is actually like grease traps and stuff from a restaurant back here down in this alley. So how do you make this a path that people want to traverse when you've got grease traps and trash bins and things like that all out the back?
Right. So I mean, you gotta figure out how is there a landscaping opportunity? That's what the trees, indicate. What kind of an environment on the wall do you provide where people don't mind walking past it? Getting it through.
And these are all things that we propose in the vacuum of nobody else there to agree with us.
Right.
Or disagree with us. More importantly, that they can't disagree with us, because you asked a very important question when we started this, and it's a question that you start most of your projects with, which is what?
You say it.
What if?
Yeah, what if?
What if this wasn't an alley? What if this is, excuse me, something where the artists in Bixby come to celebrate their passion, and then the people who appreciate art now have a place where they can walk through from. There's a prominent food truck company that has an office right over here, and it's a barbecue food truck. And he often, the idea is, okay, let's have them park here next to the party deck, and then we can make this side of the building. It's a safe pedestrian alley. Walking down to, there's a Charles Page Park, I think it's Charlie Page Park down here in downtown Bixby, and then there's shops and vending right here. There's another parking lot here, and that was property that we can't really touch, but we use the opportunity of the building in the alley to create a pathway that actually connects the rest of downtown into uses this building to connect two parts of downtown Bixby, which I thought was a great idea. And I this is unfortunately was one of those clients that you never really hear back from, so you don't know if it was your ideas or the budget. But this was a fun project to collaborate on, even if it was very short-lived. Because you can take some of these ideas and reuse them. This is how you develop your ideas. You just have these jam sessions, and you keep your drawings, right?
Amen.
Always keep your drawings, because you never know when you're going to come back and do this. Or you can use some of this stuff. This project hasn't been built. It might come back. In fact, what's really funny, I don't know if I told you this, I got contacted by another client in downtown Bixby, who's renovating. It's a very large client in downtown Bixby, who was building a new headquarters. And one of the functions that they wanted in that space was public space for the Bixby Chamber of Commerce to use. So,
oh, wow. This is great.
So who knows? It could come back all the way around, and we end up doing the project through another client. So you never know when some of this stuff comes around. So what's really interesting about this art crawl, this art walk that's in here, is you had the same concept in another project that you and I collaborated on.